Now let's take a look at page 5. EACC engages youth in war against graft. Now, EACC has established school outreach programs targeting learning institutions to help develop a culture of integrity. The commission chair, Oginde, said youth's energy, if channeled the right way, could bring down corruption. That story is beefed up for you on page 5. Let's move on and take a look at page 6. How state is using National Intelligence Service to gauge public opinion. The poll is about issues that dominate Kenyans' lives, such as cost of living and healthcare. An officer who is involved in the survey says they are mostly receiving negative responses. That story is beefed up for you on page 6. Let's move on and take a look at page 7. Wanjigi tells Kenyans to start tax revolution. Wanjigi says another civil action on tax revolt is yet to be formed to cripple Kenya Kwanza's administration. He questioned the essence of filing nil returns, urging young unemployed Kenyans to shun filing tax returns. And that story is beefed up for you on page 7. Let's move on and take a look at page 8. Leaders trade blame on poll body reconstitution as crisis deepens. Now, Ruto, Kenyatta and Kalonzo have called for urgent action amid growing public frustration over delays. Court cases, political infighting, leave by elections, boundary reviews and representation in limbo. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. On page 9 this morning, MPs with a voice in public but muted in parliament. Now, 19 MPs in the National Assembly and 3 senators have remained silent during debates. Their silence is ironic when contrasted with pressing challenges their constituents face. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 9. Among them includes Kapsaret MP Oscar Sudi, who is among the lawmakers who are notably silent in the National Assembly according to Mzalendo Parliamentary Scorecard. Now, let's take a look at page 10, Birth of Law Reforms and Why I Declined Kibaki's Appointment as Shadow Minister. Now, this is all about Martha Karua's story of a book she recently published, Against the Tide. And you have more insights here on IPPG Talks, Clenched Fast, and more on page 10 and page 11 of the Standard this morning on her book Serialization. Let's take a look at page 12 now. Government to unveil new TVET funding model before Christmas. Now, the model to guarantee 85,000 shillings for students that marks shift from university model. TVET institutions are facing enrollment challenges as government pushes for national polytechnic status. That story is beefed up for you on page 12. On page 13 this morning, just about when we thought governance was about to begin, politics gathers race. Now, on that, let's go to it. It's hardly been a fortnight, but the lofty words were embedded from the recent State of the Nation address about quote-unquote listening and learning, already seeming long forgotten in the minds of this Kenya Kwanza administration turned broad-based government. Now, we are told that Kenyans who relied against their Adani deals are not patriots but traitors in all but name. Faced on June 25th during the Gen Z-led finance bill protests. More of that is beefed up for you on page 13 this morning. Let's take a look at page 14. That lands us on expert opinion. Stop blatant exploitation of Kenyans by tech companies. Now, artificial intelligence is celebrated as a transformative technology with the potential to revolutionize industries, enhance productivity, and address global challenges. However, the path to this advancement often obscures the labor exploitation and harm endured by the people working behind the scenes to make artificial intelligence functional. More of that is beefed up for you on page 14. On page 15 this morning, should all schoolgirls be given free sanitary pads? Now, Phoebe Maina, educationist, says yes, and on the contrary, Mustafa Lusaka, city resident, says no. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 15. Now, let's take a look at page 18. Syria war with Assad now gone, Middle East battle lines are redrawn. President Bashar al-Assad fled to Russia after after Syrian rebels seized the capital Damascus and opposed on Sunday. With conflict being fought on several Middle East fronts, the region will also have to handle the new United States administration, and that story is beefed up for you on page 18. Now, let's move on and take a look at the Financial Standard this morning. It's all about the power deals, pressure mounts on IPPPs. Now, the House Committee seeks decisive action in dealing with the secrecy that marks the selection of farms and power purchase agreements with Kenya Power, which gives them free rein in setting electricity bills. All that is beefed up for you on the Financial Standard this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at the business news. KRA collects 1 trillion shillings in 5 months as it races to meet 2.7 trillion shillings target. A notable contributor has been customs revenue, which has consistently exceeded 70 billion shillings monthly the past 4 months. Taxman must now secure additional 1.695 trillion shillings in 7 months to meet National Treasury's ambitious target. You want to catch up with that on page 25. Now, in the funding sector, EAC ministers okay 103.5 million shillings for Lake Basin Commission Office. Now, the East African Community Council of Ministers has approved additional funding of $802,000 for the completion of new Lake Victoria Basin Commission headquarters in Kisumu. The EAC Secretary General Veronica Nduva disclosed that the funding was approved by the 46th Ordinary Council that met in Arusha, Tanzania last month. In the agricultural sector, tea farms earn 1.5 billion shillings at Mombasa auction. Tea farmers earned 1.5 billion shillings from the weekly sale of 4.6 million kilograms of tea at the Mombasa tea auction, up from the previous 1.4 billion shillings. In the sale, the Kimunye factory earned 45.5 million shillings after the sale of 108,880 kilograms of tea, followed by Ngere with 41 billion shillings with 100,392 kilograms. Now, let's shift gears and take a look at the international scene. David versus Goliath battle at top court climate hearings. Now, major economists have argued that the court should not tamper with the existing United Nations conventions. Tiny nations say their homelands were being destroyed by climate change, a phenomenon they had nothing to do with. Now, briefly, in Sudan, 28 killed in fuel station bombing. At least 28 people were killed and 37 others injured on Sunday in a bombardment targeting a fuel station south of Sudanese capital Khartoum, according to a volunteer group and local media. In South Korea, Yoon banned from exiting country. President Yoon Suk Yeol was banned from leaving the country on Monday, the Justice Ministry said, less than a week after he plunged the country into chaos by briefly imposing marital law. In the United States, Trump to pardon Capitol Hill attackers. Now, the United States President-elect Donald Trump said on Sunday that he will pardon his supporters involved in the 2021 Capitol attack, starting on his first day in office. Now, in France, pressure piles on Macron to name prime minister. Now, the French President Emmanuel Macron was on Monday set to hold a series of consultations with party bosses as pressure grew on him to name a new prime minister and defuse a political crisis. You want to catch up with all that on international news on page 27. Let's move on quickly and take a look at sports news on the Standard this morning. Now, we start with Formula 1 2024 season. The talking points now: Max the Master as he rises above Red Bull turbulence. Lewis Hamilton won 6 of his 7 titles at Mercedes. You want to catch up with that on page 37. On page 38 this morning, Kenya out to reclaim team title at Interparliamentary Games. Now, Kanini Kega looking for a 3rd golf title at the 14th East African Community Interparliamentary Games in Mombasa. Kenya strike gold in relay a day after they got off to a poor start in women volleyball and football. That story is beefed up for you on page 38. On page 39 this morning, This is what awaits Hussein and Mariga at Kandanda House. Now, Hussein beat Doris Petra to win the FKF presidency on Saturday, and the team, a fresh start, has to fix the game once and for all. Now, what is awaiting them is beefed up for you on page 39. Let's take a look at the cover page of the Standard. Mbappe needs a helping hand as troubled Real tackle Atlanta. 15-time winners have lost 3 of their first 5 matches and find themselves 24th in the standings. In form, Atlanta lead Serie A and have not been beaten yet in the Champions League. You want to catch up with that on page 40. Let's stay there a little bit. Girona dream heading towards collapse as they battle Liverpool. Now, Girona host Liverpool in the Champions League today, knowing the clash offers a chance to lay a glove on a top side before the European dream peters out. Now, all that is beefed up for you on page 40. Let's take a quick look at the Daily Nation this morning. On the front page, why Ruto, Uhuru are closing ranks. This is all on politics. Meeting sparks speculation about a potential throw in their fractured relationship. Is it a handshake? That is the big question. President William Ruto's surprise visit to the rural home of his predecessor, Uhuru Kenyatta, adds a new twist to the fluid political landscape that started with the reapproachment between Dr. Ruto and the opposition leader Raila Odinga. You want to catch up with that on page 4 and page 5. Also on page 7, this morning, IEBC row. Who is fooling whom? Now, with competing interests among major political players, the IEBC Commission remains a pawn in Kenya's political chess game, as backpassing continues as to who carries the responsibility for the impasse. A review of developments since the last election points to how the country got to this dilemma. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. On page 3 this morning, MCS county officials gobble up over 1 billion shillings on trips in 4 months. On page 10, judiciary says this morning, e-filing hitch was not a plot against Gachagua. The probe reveals technical problems locked out petitioners who sought to file cases during ouster of then Deputy President. Also on the cover page this morning, how Kenyatta University and JKUAT sank millions in idle Rwanda campuses. The institutions are struggling to dispose of properties worth millions in Kigali, where their campuses have remained idle since 2017. Now, let's get up close and candid with the Daily Nation. On page 2, counties turning into employment bureaus. Now, governors have often blamed the huge workforce in the counties on inheriting employees from the defunct local authorities. Now, reports show that devolved units' expenditure on personal emoluments is way above the legal limit of 35% of the total revenue. You want to catch up with more insights on page 2 this morning. On page 3, devolved units gobble up over 1 billion shillings on trips allowances in 4 months. Now, 1.25 billion of shillings county executives and assemblies spent on domestic and international travel between July and October, according to Controller of Budget report. Now, more of those insights are beefed up for you on page 3. Let's move on and take a look at page 4. Why Ruto and his predecessor Uhuru are closing ranks. Now, sources claim former Deputy President Gachagua had also visited Kenyatta a few months before his impeachment by Parliament, and former Prime Minister Odinga made a similar move 3 months ago. So is it a shifting political landscape? We are waiting to see. Now, insiders suggest that the visit was part of a larger strategy by the president to mend fences with the influential mountain community and address the growing dissatisfaction in his base exacerbated by Gachagua's ouster. That story is beefed up for you on page 4 and page 5. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 6. Decisive week for Raila AUC bid with debate showdown. Now, this is a moment of reckoning event to broadcast live from Commission's headquarters in Addis Ababa on Friday. former premier will come face to face with his opponents as they articulate their vision for the people of the African continent. You want to catch up with that on page 6. Let's move on and take a look at page 7 this morning. The mounting concern: Ruto Uhuru wade into blame game over IEBC impasse. There is worry that delay in reconstituting IEBC could harm credibility of the 2027 elections. The president and his predecessor called for a speedy resolution of the court cases that has impeded appointment of a panel to pick new commissioners. That story is beefed up for you on page 7. Let's move on and take a look at page 8. Peninah loses assets over gold scam. Now, Kenya lost billions of shillings in a similar scheme between 1991 and 1993. United States and the United Kingdom governments sanctioned Peninah close associates and firms over the scam in Zimbabwe. That story is beefed up for you on page 8. Now, let's move on and take a look at page 10. Judiciary rejects claim e-filing hitch was plot against Rigathi Gachagua. Now, the breakdown included an unauthorized refund that prevented petition from moving forward. Petitioners alleged a scheme to defeat justice when system failure barred them from filing a case on Gachagua ouster. Now, here's the suspicion. A judge added a twist to the issue when he questioned what it would mean for polls. Last week, Supreme Court Judge Isaac Lenaola revisited the matter, questioning how the judiciary system could have failed and whether it portends a worrying reality for those who might want to challenge presidential elections in 2027. 3 petitioners wrote a complaint letter to Chief Registrar of the Judiciary, Winfrida Mokaya, and Chief Justice Martha Koome, demanding answers on why the e-filing system broke down. Now, on page 11 this morning, it's all about 16 days of activism against gender-based violence. Now, this morning, quote unquote, he demanded sex or my life, end of quote. One woman's kindness gone wrong. She had always believed in helping others, but what happened that terrifying night changed her perspective of situations whenever she is traveling. Now, that is the story of Miss Caroline Chepkoech during an interview at Nairobi's Upper Hill. You want to catch up with her story on page 11. Let's take a look at page 12. Embakasi gas plant owner charged given 3 million shillings bond. Now, prosecution says the blast also caused damages running into tens of millions of shillings. Businessman and former Maxis Energy employee faced 10 counts of manslaughter. Now, that story is beefed up for you on page 12. Let's shift gears and take a look at expert opinion. Why United Nations needs to change status of Haiti mission. Doing nothing is not an option for the United Nations, but sending an under-resourced mission is a recipe for disaster for the people of Haiti and for the participating nations. On page 15, outsider Ontata could back trend. Now, Gen Zs may have been forced off the streets, but they have been running guerrilla campaigns on other platforms that the authorities have been unable to stifle. That story is beefed up for you on page 15. Now, today on the DN2 article, it's all about powering SMEs. And this morning, the story goes to smart tech for smallholder farmers. So you will catch up with that on page 2 and page 3 of the Daily Nation this morning. Let's shift gears and take a look at county news. Now we start with Lamu County. Fancy a donkey race. Watch out lest you faint on the way. Event becoming increasingly popular over the years, attracting bigger prizes. Now in Nakuru County, now the 3rd city with the most new HIV cases. We take a look at that on page 18. Now, spike attributed to mother-child transmission and infection among young people. This is all about why Nakuru City is the 3rd with the most new HIV cases. The statistics stand at 65,149 cases which is the number of people living with the virus in Nakuru County. Now, in Uasin Gishu County, witnesses' absence stalls Mandago's Finland scholarship suit. Now, the Director of Public Prosecution is facing hurdles in the 1 billion Finland education scandal case involving Uasin Gishu Senator Jackson Mandago after witnesses failed to attend court. The scheduled hearing last Thursday was adjourned after all the witnesses slated for the day failed to show up. The prosecution had lined up for witnesses including former County Attorney Edwin Bett. That story is beefed up for you on page 18. Now, let's move on and take a look at international news. Now, with Assad gone, Syria begins new era as the world watches. Rebel leader met with Assad's prime minister on transitional government deal. Rebels seized the capital and ousted President Assad, who fled to Russia. Now, briefly, in The Hague, prosecutors ask ICC to convict CAR militia leaders. Prosecutors at the International Criminal Court asked judges on Monday to find 2 men accused of leading Christian-dominated militias in attacks on Muslims in Central African Republic in 2013 and 2014, guilty of all the charges against them. In Khartoum, at least 28 killed in bombardment of fuel station in Sudan's capital. Now, let's move quickly to South Korea, where the president has been banned from foreign travel as leadership crisis deepens. South Korean President Yoon Suk Yeol has been banned from leaving the country over a failed attempt at imposing martial law, a Justice Ministry official said yesterday, amid growing calls for him to step down and a deepening leadership crisis. Yoon has apologized for the botched attempt and said he was leaving his political and legal fate to his ruling People Power Party, but has not resigned. Now, let's take a look at business news. Data protection boss gets more powers in new rules. The regulations set to strengthen the Data Protection Act of 2019. The watchdog has been on aggressive drive to shield Kenyans against breaches. The digit stands at 12 million shillings, which is the amount that ODPC ordered organizations to pay complainants for data privacy breaches in the first half of 2024. Now, 7 out of 10 working youth have side hustles, poll shows. 7 in 10, or 71% of employed young Kenyans said in a new survey they have side hustles, underlining the quest to earn extra income in a tough economy. A new Geopol report, which surveyed the perceptions of youth and employment and entrepreneurship, paints the picture of how those with jobs supplement their salaries. That story is beefed up for you on page 21. Briefly, in the aviation sector, Kenya Airways eyes JKIA Gatwick direct flights. Now, the KQ plans to launch direct flights to the UK's Gatwick Airport from the Jomo Kenyatta International Airport starting July 2025 as part of a strategy expanding its business in the key market. Now, let's take a look at sports news on the Daily Nation this morning. Yes, we start with the parliamentary games. Kenya claims silver in parliamentary games. The home team plays South Sudan in men's football, and legislators from East African countries have their day out in the field in Mombasa. Now, in matters football, Messi excluded as Bellingham and Real dominate FIFA Pro hours. Now, 6 players from Champions League winners, Real Madrid, and 4 from Manchester City feature in this year's FIFA World 11 announced yesterday by the Global Players Association, with Lionel Messi absent for the first time in almost 20 years. Now, also Junior Starlets players grace talent camps in Kisumu. Back from the 2024 FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup in the Dominican Republic, Kenya players winger Marion Serenge and midfielders Joy Angela Valencia and Clotilda Auma are on a mission to motivate other upcoming athletes to shine. Now, also on page 30, Hussein and Mariga have their work cut out for them in local football. As dust settles on hotly contested exercise, hard work begins for the winners. The local teams are underfunded, leagues poorly officiated, and lack title sponsors for the benefit of players. You want to catch up with more of those insights on page 30. Now, let's take a look at the cover page this morning. How Kenyatta University and JKUAT sank millions in idle Rwanda campuses. Universities have been unable to liquidate properties they bought after institutions were closed for non-compliance with the standards. Varsities among public institutions of higher learning that are on the radar of Anti-Corruption Commission. The figures stand at 518.2 million shillings, which Auditor General says Kenyatta University spent to set up 2 campuses. In Kigali, they spent 420.7 million shillings and 97.4 million shillings in Arusha. Now, with that story of Kenyatta University and the JKUAT, we come to today's end of Morning Momentum. Thank you so much for staying with us. We appreciate your support. Our heartfelt gratitude also goes to all those who made this broadcast a success. Behind the lens, Elias, Muchina, and the Chief Controller, Peninah, Wachera. See you tomorrow, same time, same place. Until then, do have a beautiful and a blessed day ahead of you. I have been your host, Alfonsoh Omar.